Interest in sustainability among corporations is at an all-time high, with half of the world's top publicly traded companies currently working toward achieving net zero emissions, with more companies pledging to do so every day. However, given the complexity and the scope of the topic, implementing and growing ESG initiatives remains challenging. In fact, the more efforts that CEOs put into making sustainability a reality, the more they realize that their companies really aren't prepared to implement the strategy. Well, today's show centers on the importance and the reality of ESG. That's environmental, social, and governance. Of course, it's not new, but it is picking up speed as it becomes an increasingly essential and differentiating factor for organizations around the world. In fact, since 2019, internet searches for ESG have increased fivefold, while searches for CSR, remember that one, corporate social responsibility, which was an earlier focus more reflective of corporate engagement rather than changes to a core business model, well, those have declined. So ESG up, CSR down. But the principles are fantastic. There is a new WWT report, in fact, Corporate Sustainability Priorities for 2023, which motivated today's episode. Now, our featured guest is not one of the consultative or engineering experts that we might normally feature. We were inspired to speak with someone living the reality of the role itself as they lead a large global organization through these uncharted waters of ESG implementation. And I think you're going to find our conversation highly informative, as well as, of course, complimentary to the report. Welcome to Tech 37. It's your home for technology, education, and collaboration from Worldwide Technology. My name is Rob Boyd. Let's get started. Well, Varchala, welcome to Tech 37. So glad to have you with us.
Thank you for having me on today.
Well, you've spurred the paper I'm going to reference in a moment, as well as just conversations with you, have spurred a lot of education on my part. You are someone who is leading this charge for Worldwide Technology, but can you explain what your role is and how long you've been doing it?
So I joined Worldwide in 2020 to lead WWT's ESG program. I come with 23 plus years of experience in the sustainability and corporate responsibility arena, having worked across 48 plus countries. Just being someone who is so firmly grounded in the fundamentals and developments of ethical trade, socio-environmental sustainability challenges that are faced by supply chain businesses. My role is to work with various stakeholders, internal and external, both, to develop, execute, and promote WWT's sustainability goals and objectives, and then ultimately help mitigate risks related to ESG.
Yeah, no small task, it would seem. And as I have dove more into all this and kind of understanding more about your background and the demand and the incredible cross section of skills required as this moves forward. I'm going to look at my notes here for a second, but when it comes to implementing ESG, which is really why we wanted to have you on Tech 37, which is to really talk about the reality of it and your experience, not necessarily the report that was motivating this conversation, but they both, I think they're very complementary. But I've read more than 90% of S&P 500 companies now publish ESG reports in some form or fashion, and almost 70% of Russell 100 companies. The point being is that this feels like there's an increase in importance, but it feels like it's not a reporting responsibility. That is just maybe one outcome of what you do as well. How do you define ESG? What's important to understand?
Well, ESG, sustainability, corporate responsibility, all are various iterations of basically a thought process, which is going from doing less bad to more good, as I would call it. And that's the core of our strategy here at WWT. Whether it is protecting or doing less harm to the environment, or taking care of our people, our employees, or ensuring that we continue to stay governed by ethical, transparent reporting. What underpins all of this is WWT's commitment and our unique position to provide solutions to environmental, societal problems through technology and innovation. That is our strength. And I'd like to point out that my entire career of 23 plus years, WWT is the first organization that places employee safety under ESG. I lead that function as well, global employee safety. And, I take a lot of pride in saying that this is a very important social aspect, the S of ESG,
Mhm.
which is the safety and well being of our employees.
Well, when we talk about the S being sustainability as well, do you think there's been a conflation of, saying ESG equals sustainability, or what's the right balance there in terms of, there's a couple other parts of the acronym?
Well, in this aspect, and this is just my view, in this aspect, conflation to me means, I could say, amalgamation,
Mhm.
or maybe a right blend
Okay.
in some sort of way. But its definition changes every month. It changes, it varies from region to region. As we know, in Europe, ESG has evolved to be less about data and reporting needs of financial markets and other stakeholders, whereas in the US, ESG remains somewhat distinct from sustainability, as it refers primarily to finance related activities. Although this is such a fast changing landscape that who
Who's to
knows where
say?
we're headed next. Yeah, next week, next month, nobody
Okay,
knows.
note to self. I'm not going to try and pin you down on any very specific predictions about the future, which is probably safe regardless. Where did my pin go? Oh, there we go. I wanted to, it seems like this would be unnecessary to our particular audience, but I pulled this because I felt like it was important since you're doing this for Worldwide Technology, so that our audience can maybe make the right association with their own situation, be it a small or a large company, which is obviously kind of the not necessarily objective terms. But Worldwide Technology has been around for 30 years, privately held, approximately 8,000 employees around the world with $15.4 plus billion in total revenue, helping provide solutions for over 70 of the Fortune 100. And maybe not necessary to this, but I like it. Great Place to Work has been awarded to Worldwide Technology for 11 years in a row, which I think is
Yeah.
pretty awesome, because that obviously is something that comes from the people saying that it's a great place to work, not necessarily the top down. So some people may consider this big or small, but I feel like when we look at the report in terms of sustainability that WWT produced and kind of spawned this episode or motivated it, data has been called out as a top priority, regardless of being a big or a small company. So I wonder if you could just speak a little bit about the
Yeah.
importance of data to your role.
Well, I don't know if you've heard the saying, if you can't measure it, you can't manage
Yes,
it.
I have.
And I'm a true believer. I firmly believe that in today's sustainability landscape, reliable, comparable, measurable data that's backed by evidence, in addition to transparent reporting, is the catalyst for change. Data improves transparency, it builds trust, it improves trust amongst stakeholders. In addition to showing us areas for improvement, data helps mitigate and manage ESG, whether it's climate, or it's regulatory, or it's safety risks. I can share some examples of
Please.
how robust data leads to efficient and evidence-based decision making in our own program. You know, we, as part of our strategy, as part of our program, we at WWT are constantly mining our data and adding data sets around emissions, just to make sure that we're not missing
Mhm.
anything and we're doing this with integrity. So in 2020, just when we thought that we were on track of meeting our 2020 emissions goals, while we were on the parallel also updating our GHG inventory, we realized that we needed to include refrigerant emissions from HVAC systems, which we weren't including, which then led to missing our 2020 emissions scope 1 goal by a little bit. But then the choice was, we just don't want to make a blanket statement. We want to do this with integrity. We want to do it with like a true believer.
So it's like in
And
the
so
true
even
spirit of
though,
what's trying to be achieved here versus the reporting
yes,
requirements because of whomever. Yeah, I like
yeah.
that. Okay.
And we are again at that that sort of a little tricky, I would say, crossroads where, because of COVID and work from home and reduced employee commute, hardly any business travel, we realized that until now, our scope 3 was really less. It's less than 30%, which might completely change as the world normalizes and, people start, we come back to a normal way of life, which will again change our priorities around scope 3 and, what is our targets, where are we headed in terms of our strategy. So, what I'm trying to say is, how do we get to these conclusions as to what is our priority, what is future looking, where is that roadmap leading us to? It's the data
Yeah.
that drives these decisions, and I would say not only it totally drives it for us at Worldwide, it would drive for any ESG
Right,
strategy.
right. So it becomes, and I'm going to come back to data in just a moment. And I really appreciate the example that you gave there around refrigerants, and because it reminds me that
Mhm.
we don't have, or we're still developing, it feels like to me, but correct me if I'm wrong, some of the tools necessary for even measuring the things that are important
Mhm.
um, to leverage. I'm working on another project regarding AC versus DC and trying to push kind of DC microgrid concepts with sustainability. Um, because a lot of people it hadn't even dawned on them that a lot of us can't even measure electricity in terms of how it's coming in and our usage.
Right.
In a way that we could actually affect change. We certainly can measure it. We know we get billed, but how are you actually using
Yeah.
it? And could we be smarter about it? But that's just something else. Anyway, well, I'm curious too for anybody that says, "Well, wow, this sounds expensive." Is it a misconception that ESG must come at the expense of kind of bottom line type expectations there?
Um, In fact, I would say the opposite is absolutely true, as accelerating ESG initiatives can lead to significant cost savings through efficiency gains and a reduced risk profile. I was going through, just some reports that came out that, public companies that experience high to severe ESG incidents, in fact, lose a significant portion of their market capitalization. So ESG and sustainability issues genuinely move markets. I'd also like to mention that ESG is a clear differentiator for our customers when it comes to doing business with us versus competition.
Right.
Our clients, our partners want to work with us, also because in this space, I feel confident saying that we are ahead of the curve, considering that, we're privately held and we're not as such bound by regulation. Our entire ESG strategy and roadmap is either internally driven or driven by our customers and partners. And, I would say that sustainability is definitely a key indicator of business performance and a big differentiator for us.
Yeah, and I thought that was interesting too, just because I feel like publicly held companies that are more sensitive to regulatory changes might be, and I think back to security technologies and such, where you see increasing regulations around this, and it's are you motivated
Mhm.
because you have to, or are you motivated because it's the right thing to do for the environment? But then there's this societal thing that I like that you guys are doing, which is recognizing that there are partners. You want to work with partners who are responsible in this area because it reflects your corporate values, and vice versa. And that's I would assume that's one of the longer outcomes out of this, which is kind of an expectation that, hey, we expect the people that we partner with, maybe not even just customers, but supply chain or other things, and say, if you're not living up to this, then we're not going to be able to do business with you, because it would have the kind of that knock-on effect, I would assume, of at the very least, of
Right.
negatively affecting your own numbers. Am I paraphrasing that correctly?
Absolutely. No, absolutely. We ourselves form part of someone's scope 3 emissions, and someone forms part of our scope 3 emissions. So it's a very interesting dynamic. But at the end of the day, it all boils down to how committed you are, and, uh, what are your fundamentals of an ESG program.
Yeah.
So, it really boils down to that.
Yeah, no, I like that, and well, and I want to bring it back to, so we mentioned the report was kind of of an inspiration for wanting to talk to you, but really get the reality in the trenches. So I want to bring these points up not as saying that you have to agree with all of them necessarily, because I don't think you wrote the report, because you have different responsibilities,
Mhm.
but I'm assuming you looked at it, and we're encouraging everybody to download it, regardless you're living it. It doesn't matter to me. But in the sustainable report, there were 5 priorities, which I think are interesting in terms of anyone that's trying to get their head wrapped around how do we move forward with ESG. It feels overwhelming. Let me just read these real quick. We'll put them on screen. First one, mature your data posture. 2, set realistic science-based goals. 3, establish a sustainable technology strategy and framework. 4, think beyond technology. And then 5, develop an executive talk track. Starting with that first one, this is where we get back to the data part of it. But what does it mean by maturing your data posture? How do you translate that into what you do?
Well, what that means is identifying current ESG trends and market drivers, engaging with external stakeholders to understand what data is important to them, reviewing regulatory requirements, of course, and then also engaging with internal stakeholders to understand current status and finalize areas for improvement based on an organization's goals and business strategy. And then last but not the least, tools. I would say the tools and software that's used for data collection and analysis has a huge role in the quality of data. So use the right
Yeah.
tools. That is just so important.
Well, and obviously, so one of the things that I'll end with is the fact that Worldwide Technology is well poised, obviously, to help companies do this type of thing. You work on the inside. Hopefully, you're getting some of that help yourself wherever needed, because I know you represent a team of people that work for you and with you to do these things. But we'll refer to the report for more information on that one. But the second one around it talks about this notion of goal setting, of course, being realistic about the goals, which that could be a wiggly word too. But science-based goals. Can you tell me what is meant by science-based goals?
So Science-Based Targets Initiative is SBTI, is kind of the platinum standard for non-financial organizations to set their emissions goals or ESG goals. Basically, what this initiative does is it provides a clearly defined pathway for companies and financial institutions to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, and as well as help prevent the worst impacts of climate change and future-proof business growth. Now, why this is really important and it has just gained so much momentum and focus is that targets are considered science-based if they are in line with what the latest climate science deems necessary to meet the goals of the Paris Agreement, and which is limiting global warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels. Um, we at WWT have aligned our targets in accordance with the Science Based Target Initiative. It's called the SBTI. And also, I'd like to point out that we have also aligned our goals to the UN Sustainability Development Goals. They're called the SDGs, around 3 goals: affordable and clean energy, responsible production and consumption, and climate action.
Wow. I think it becomes it without diving into other parts of the conversation. It does become, I would think, a challenge to say, well, what set of things are we all aligning around? Because there can be a lot of argument about what is necessary, what is not necessary. I'm also struck by the fact that I think of when I think of organizations becoming, being polluters, if I was just to use a really overly archaic term, I think of manufacturing and things with spewing smokestacks and stuff. I don't think of air-conditioned office space and logistics and things. But part of that feels like you have to really work hard to figure out, well, what are all the different elements and how they contribute because of what your particular company is doing to those things. Has there been surprising revelations about the type of things that can contribute negatively to these improving these numbers?
It's constant. It's like we are constantly challenging ourselves to increase our data and increase our emissions inventory, make sure that that's bulletproof, make sure we're not only not missing any data points, but making sure that we are including, let's say, all our global locations which are within our operational control. We are including, we're constantly data mining, putting various guardrails, checks and balances internally to make sure that we have data specialists on our team who are checking, measuring, making sure, filtering that data for correctness and accuracy, but then also then that data sort of has a second filter in terms of when it's put in a tool. So that tool then also filters it from an automation level.
Right.
So I again coming back to the fact that just forget about what we report to the outside world and what we message out for our own selves.
Yeah.
It's just so important to know where we are and where we need to be, and I guess it's the facts, the data, the numbers that will guide us.
I remember having to look this up, and I'm not going to try to give the definition myself, so I hope you can do this for me. But in some of our pre-conversations, you'd mentioned when it comes to targeting this shift from, I believe it was intensity-based targets to
Mhm.
absolute targets. Can you tell me what that is and why it's
Right.
important?
So when I joined, we already had, before I joined, WWT had some goals around intensity based targets because that was the norm and that's where the industry was sitting
Okay.
at. And then that changed to absolute targets. Mainly, the world realized, we all realized, and we became aware that an intensity target is a normalized metric that sets a company's emissions targets relative to some sort of economic output. That could be, um, we will have these many emissions based on number of employees or revenue or sales. So some sort of economic output. Whereas an absolute target is referring to the total amount of emissions being emitted. Now, why the world moved from intensity to absolute targets is an absolute target refers to reducing one's emission footprint in total absolute terms, and that focuses on reduction, mitigation, switching to renewables, implementing real-time efficiencies, measuring, understanding what is the carbon intensity around everything that we do, around every initiative that an organization takes up. So I guess the shift to absolute sort of was also a sort of aha moment when we realized that you really can't make an impact and move the needle if you're constantly sort of telling yourself, well, because I grew from A to B or 1 to 10, it's okay if I emit from this to this.
Yeah.
Or, I mean, at the end of the day, that's not really leading to reduction or
Interesting. Yeah.
mitigation. And so it's, for example, the whole concept of, let's say, offsets, buying carbon offsets. When organizations invest in offsets as their primary strategy, then I guess there's a little, I don't know if it's a bit of a chaotic approach,
Yeah.
but I would like to say that, so when you invest in offsets, you're still spending the same money on electricity, you are still using fossil fuels, plus now you're paying for offsets. And at the end, you're not really reducing your emissions in
Yeah.
totality. So that's what absolute target says, that we understand that as businesses grow, as employees increase, as revenues grow, I guess it's not that your consumption will reduce, but the source of that energy will change
Right.
to renewables, to green, to just basically to a more sustainable source of
Well, it
energy.
really gets back to the
So
spirit of
that
what
was
you're trying to do or should be trying to do
yeah,
versus just the reporting at the, the net difference at the end may not matter as much. Okay.
right.
Okay. That makes sense. Well, on priority number 3, we talk about a sustainable technology framework. You've already talked a bit about technology being important, obviously, because technology and the data capture and efficacy of all that is certainly important. I'll just bring this one up kind of on the fly, but it feels like, is data center a really big focus for reduction of emissions? Is that a focus that a lot of people start with in the information technology space?
I has to be.
Yeah.
I don't see any other way of managing this. Like, if you don't even know where you are, then how can you know where you want to be? And how will you know where you are unless you have the data?
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's just, for me, I honestly, I don't know of any other way to do this.
Yeah. Well, how do you square this? And well, I know how you square it, but but just thinking how you would say it, because on the when we get to the fourth priority, we're talking about thinking beyond technology. So that's not
Technology.
the
Yep.
point of ignoring the technology. It doesn't just do away with that. But what does it mean to think beyond technology? What does that include?
Well, technology is an enabler, certainly not a solution in and of itself. I would say operationalizing sustainable technology into your IT footprint requires a great deal of strategic planning, extensive testing and validation, and scalable deployment. I would say some ideas that could help strengthen this mindset could be how to make sense of the vendor and services market and where they fit into your strategy. The testing and validation capabilities required for vetting technology proposals. Where can your supply chain potentially help at scale or not? So, just some of these things, I think, are great, compelling mindsets that could, sort of help us think through these situations.
Well, no, the final priority, because it definitely feels like these things kind of escalate in importance and almost have to happen in this order. Obviously, why would we not
Mhm.
have them numbered priorities? But is in terms of where ESG fits into the boardroom conversation, and are most ESG initiatives going to start not maybe not from the boardroom, but hopefully from the executive level? Because I would think that it's not something that really could bottom up and very well and stay around long. It feels like it needs that level, but boardroom feels even more important or a higher level type of goal to have that level of communication that's beyond just say CEO level. It feels very even more
Now,
encompassing. Can you explain how that works?
I would say board level buy in is integral to approving direction, creating alignment, allocating budget or resources. And I would say that CEOs, CFOs who focus on ESG have the chance to transform the business culture and I would say definitely improve revenue, make part ESG a part of culture. It's what I believe in. It's culture, not compliance, is the answer. um, Carry out climate risk assessment, emphasize on the costs versus risk reduction from implementation of these strategies, improved customer relationships, improved customer trust, and goodwill. I would say it goes a long way in even improving productivity and employee motivation. So it's I get so many comments and feedback from just our employees who are so interested in various initiatives that we are doing or recycling drives or how do we dispose of our electrical gadgets, and is WWT doing sort of an on-site recycling IT drive. So I just think that awareness is literally coming up so quickly that forget about board level buy-in. I just think it's impossible. It's not optional
Yeah,
anymore.
yeah.
It's non-negotiable. It's not a choice.
Well, you talk about about developing an executive talk track. I would assume because I've followed some of your interviews and other things that you've done as well, that's second nature to what you do at this point. But is it important to have something that speaks to certain executives so that it well, I guess it does. It's part of the culture. You have that talk track and you encourage others to do the same. Are you doing that type of thing?
I mean, for me, I guess the biggest piece of that executive talk track is communications. I would say that of course, there are certain fundamentals. I would say the three things that I would suggest is speak on their terms, be ready to back it up by reporting, by data, by
Yeah.
evidence. And why I stress upon the communication piece is the ability to communicate to internal and external stakeholders, whether it is progress or successes or failures or roadblocks or best practices, is something that builds confidence and adds value. As our work progresses, so does our understanding of what drives our impact. Now, I I'm not shy of saying that we don't always have the answers. In fact, we know we'll make mistakes, and that's okay. But we also know that these mistakes are part of improving and getting us closer to the metrics that truly matter. And So yet again, it boils down to metrics. We are back to metrics and,
Which is
realistic
how
and
you speak to
measurable
business
data.
people, right? The technology and the business ties together through something that we can show, as you started this whole conversation off with, is well, we can't improve it if we can't measure it, because we
Right.
even the relative versus absolute. I think of the fact that
Yes.
you were reminding me back in that part of the conversation of kind of teenage rationale, as I remember it when my kids were teenagers. In that, well, they rationalized this because I did all this, and I'm like, well, but that's still wrong. Which I don't know that really
Yeah.
works. That can really outweigh things. Do you think that ESG, like, I feel like some things are, and I don't mean this as a bad thing. I think in the long run, this would be a good thing. But do you think it's possible that the things that you call out and you have to kind of evangelize at this stage, and as the industry learns together and we ask questions that don't have easy answers, but eventually the idea is that this type of thing is just part of doing business and it's not necessarily a standalone, unique function that has to be constantly ratified and such? Do you think it's headed in that direction eventually, or is it way, where do you think we are?
It has to be ingrained in an organization's business strategy. It has to be ingrained in, and I feel very good because my job is so much easier at Worldwide, because everything that ESG speaks for and speaks to is already part of our culture and our core
Yeah.
values. So there's really not much heavy lifting that I need to come in and do. It filters down from our leadership. It's just, it's something that's understood and accepted, and it's just part of day-to-day
So
business. And
gracious of you to say that. Yeah.
I guess yeah, I mean, I guess for organizations to succeed, and again, i'm I'm not saying that we won't make mistakes. Yes, we will make mistakes, but it is our commitment to stay focused. It's our commitment to continue to do the right thing, and make small strides, big strides in this direction, and I will be fine. We'll do well. So I just want to sort of sum it up and say that, from setting goals and targets, aligning and committing to SBTI, it's just in this fast paced industry that's changing, the landscape is changing so quickly. Now the industry is moving towards, data, a pre assurance stage, and organizations need to, I would say, they have to align themselves to becoming intentional, tactical, data driven with sustainability plans, decarbonization roadmaps, and again, working for WWT, I feel great because guess what? Technology sits at the center of all this.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, and and like many things, especially that we feature on this particular show, there's a language and a taxonomy and such that we're learning here as we go along. But I'm hearing a lot of consistency with others that I work with, and so I do feel like there is this swell of understanding and placing importance in the right areas where they need to be. Because I would hope we all agree there's no question we need to be doing something collectively, because it's going to take all of us pulling together to be able to kind of maybe not reverse everything we've done damage-wise, but to certainly be better stewards of our environment than we have been here to date. But well, Varchala, thank you so much for taking the time to join and talk through what you've been doing there. And I trust that hope we can check in with you in the future when need be.
Absolutely. I'm blessed. I love what I do. It's exciting. It's challenging, and it also makes me a little nervous, but that adds fun to it, right?
Absolutely. Well, thank you.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Implementing technology to support ESG initiatives is essential for increasing business success and decreasing those adverse effects. By beginning to adopt sustainability projects and utilizing technology, profits can be increased and positive changes can be achieved. But navigating the vast array of tools and solutions for ESG can be difficult. But with Worldwide Technology's expertise, not to mention the incredible Advanced Technology Center, or ATC, you can quickly identify the most effective solutions. And one simple way to get started is to download and review the Corporate Sustainability Priorities for 2023, which we've linked below. But WWT or not, I encourage you to find a partner who can offer a complete approach to ESG and create a specific plan for your desired outcomes. Thank you for watching.